So I want to remind everyone we're in San Diego coming up, so you can register now for the next conference. If we didn't do that business, we wouldn't be doing our job. So you've got a chance today to register for that event coming up very shortly. So thanks for being back with us here for Pain Points. It's going to get informal quickly, which is great. It's a great session just to get your feedback. So I want to bring up our chair of this session, which is Rick Herrera from Constellation One, and Jason Sanchez from the National Association of Realtors to give us our first topic to discuss here, and we'll have Eric Stegemann moderating the session as well. So come on up, guys.
All right, well, hey, I want to thank everybody who's hung out. It's the last day. It's been a good few days. We've had some really good events, some good happy hours, rooftop bars, all kinds of fun stuff here, the Riverwalk. But you are all the diehards. You are still here. Through all of it, you still showed up, and I feel like you should be rewarded. So I'm going to ask everybody, please look under your chair. All right, no, there's nothing there. We have 60 minutes to go through this, but in reality, I'm sure just like me, all your flights have been delayed too, so we have lots of time. I will start by introducing Jason here from the NER. Jason and the NER have been doing a bunch of work with regards to data shares and statewides, and he's going to talk about some of the lessons, some of the things that he's learning and what they're doing and how they're trying to incorporate RESO. So, take it away.
Thanks, thanks, Rick. I'm just reminiscing a little bit. My first conference was back then it was not called RESO. It was in Philadelphia. We were just joking. Me and Rick were a part of that, and just always had RESO as a passion in my heart. So this community means a lot to us. But as far as NER, I'm the director of MLS engagement. So I do outreach with mainly MLS executives. So we have advisory boards and we have MLS committees, but what we've been doing ever since I've been with NAR, I remember Pain Points, that was in South Carolina, a lot of you were a part of that. And we had just passed like 8 policies, and there was best practices, there was 12 best practices that were implemented, and it was some heated discussion about some of the things that were related to native database. And so ever since that particular time, I wasn't with NAR at the time, but I was with Austin. And so we've really taken an initiative to look at how do we strengthen our relationships, especially with RESO members and the tech community. So we formed some outreach industry calls. And so we now have industry calls with MLS providers, and now the tech vendor community. We have Rick's part of one of them, and then also the broker industry call too as well. So, and really just to try to get feedback, because there's going to be, especially with some of the recent policy changes, work that needs to be done in the back end and from the vendor community. And so we want to get that feedback and be proactive about it. So we've started this initiative in the last year. It's gone really well. We've gotten a lot of great feedback, and we're open, and really we just want to have more of you participate. So if you're interested in that, reach out to me. One of the big things that we're working on right now is our data share, a statewide data share initiative. So 2 years ago, our NAR president at the time, Charlie Oppler, started what's called a presidential advisory group to look at data sharing, because we had a broker need. Brokers, of course, want to have data, and they want to be able to just have it from anywhere that they belong, as far as belonging to MLSs from across the country. So there was a pack that was put together. They had, I don't know, hundreds of meetings. I've been with NAR only a year. I participated in, I think, about 35. There was people like Sam, a lot of technologists, a lot of brokers, some of the smartest people in the industry were a part of that. So what they came up with was a best practice that define statewide data share. And so now that was approved at the NAR NXT conference recently. Now we're at the point where we're just about to announce the hiring of a consultant, and we're going to create a resource toolkit. That was part of our recommendation. And we're going to really need a lot of feedback from RESO and the tech community. And so we're going to work with Sam and RESO and the whole community and try to get your feedback. So that's what I wanted to kind of share with you today. Just look out for that. Those of you that'll be at mid-year, we'll be making an announcement then. And we're going to be working with CMLS and RESO for that initiative. So, thank you.
Does anybody have any questions about what he's talked about? Are there any questions or thoughts around some of the work that they're doing while he's up here? Yes. Love you.
Thing in regards of the NAR's mandate of showing the attribution and I can't say the word now, compensation, and whether that is, because the wording's kind of weird that the MLSs have to provide it to the idea or the data consumers, but it's optional for display. Is that the correct interpretation of that?
Go ahead and repeat that.
So for the compensation, which was I think last year when it got approved and everything, along with the attribution, IDX providers have to provide it to the data consumers, but it's optional for display?
So the mandate is to put it into the data feed. And as far as putting it for display, yeah, that is optional.
Because the reason I ask is some of the MLSs that have come to us make it sound like it's mandatory, and they're not sure. And I think that there's some confusion in that verbiage.
Right.
It is mandatory for an MLS-operated website, but not for IDX and display.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
What
that's a great
Steve
point.
didn't say from 4 feet away from the microphone was it is mandated for an MLS website, but not for brokers.
Yes, great point.
From a consumer standpoint, I need to know that part of it, or distributor.
Yeah, and just a quick point. So Bill's part of one of our calls, and so that's part of the outreach. So we have our entire team on there. We have our policy team, being on the engagement side. We have our legal counsel on those calls too as well, so that we answer these particular questions, not just, because we're always engaging with MLS executives. We've been doing that for years, but we also want to provide education and resources too. And I see several of you in the room that are part of those. But right now, we've just invited those that we know. We've worked with Sam, but everybody's open to be a part of that. So,
Are there other thoughts or questions for him? I'm going to go through. There are a couple topics that people have posted online, and it might be worth just hanging out for just a second longer. One of the first questions that people asked are, as brokerages have started requesting data feeds to power AI uses, and if so, do license agreements used by MLSs adequately address how this data will be used and what those use cases can be? I know certainly AI, machine learning, ChatGPT, BARD, all these things have been huge things in the news. Sam kind of kicked us off with that initially. I thought that would be an interesting bit. I would love to hear what people have to think, ways they're using stuff, or concerns that they have with artificial intelligence, taking data, using data, sharing data, creating data. It's great to have you here as well in case you can maybe answer some questions as well. But are there thoughts or questions on this topic that we'd like to discuss? And the hard part of pain points is always getting the ice broken and the first couple of people to talk. So we need someone to stand up.
I'll kick it off,
first
Rick.
bit.
I mean, I think as an industry, we really need to get our head around this because, you think there could be copyright issues and other things. And I think, really we need to put together some kind of training or education on, I hate to use the word, but like ethical uses. It's got some great tools. You think, it'll change, you can give it code and it'll change languages and things like that. But if you're going to use it to write remarks, or other things. And I mean, certainly it's capable. You can hand it data and it'll kick back stuff. But I mean, I think you don't want to just blindly, publish and go. I mean, you've got to have some ethical responsibility, certainly as a licensee, when you're using that kind of data or those kinds of tools, right, to fill in a listing content or something, advertising, any of that stuff. And I mean, it's an amazing tool, but sometimes it gets things wrong. It can pass the bar exam, but it doesn't mean that when you're representing something as important as a transaction or a description or something like that, that it really shouldn't be carefully proofed and verified. And I think I think we need to really put together some kind of training or guardrails or something that would help us who really are looking at implementing it, right? I mean, it's really cool. And you think about, running a bunch of pictures through and having it help, advertising remarks, it's awesome. But it also, I think, comes with some peril. And, and as we were talking at breakfast, it's as bad as it's ever going to be, right? It's only up from here. But, but it's kind of a two-edged sword.
Great point, Greg. So what we are, from NAR standpoint, we've been working on AI and copyright for quite a bit, especially from the legal standpoint. So a big part of what we do is risk mitigation. So providing E&O insurance to MLSs and associations. That's a big, a thing that we do as far as our legal. So we've done presentations. We did one at NXT, and we talked about, we had our emerging tech team. They talked about the AI aspect of it, how it works, and then our legal team looked at it from the copyright standpoint. So I was just talking to several of you today. So our entire legal team right now is, and starting with Katie Johnson, who a lot of you know, she is probably the biggest user of ChatGPT right now in our organization. And so they're looking at, I know what they're doing, they're looking at this from what's the good, bad, and ugly. And we're gonna have 4 or 5 different presentations at NAR Meteor, and all of our teams are gonna be looking at that. So what will come from that is education and resources. We have a Window to the Law series. They're working on, something to talk about, AI and some of the risk, and just to kind of educate. And one of my biggest takeaways from this conference is to take business cases, because we have a lot of committees. We have a risk management committee, taking business cases and bringing it to this group, and having more people like our brokers and our realtors and members talk to and be part of RESO, so that we can look at this from a full and transparent perspective.
Greg Pollack, I'm from Cloud, the MLS. A simple solution along the copyright issue would be watermarking. So anything that is transferred from ChatGPT would be watermarked, and that watermark would stay on there, just like we do with photographs to the MLS. That's a simple solution. You could see what's not, what's ChatGPT. I guess I don't know how many other alphabet letters I can put behind it, but that I think would be an instant solution right now until we get to a more permanent solution.
After this next question, we're going to let Jason off the hook. He was not supposed to have to moderate this session, so Jeff's going to go, but you've got one more coming here.
Not a question, just an observation. I mean, copyright is great. I think a lot of us have a fear that, the cat's already out of the bag at that point in time. I think acceptable use and some of the other definitions that maybe the legal team is leery of looking at in today's legal environment probably need a severe re-examination. I don't think the copyright alone is going to get us there.
I had. Go ahead.
Yeah, and like I said, it's a great point, and that's why we're looking at it from like discovery standpoint right now. We're just being educated as much as we can, but they're looking at it from every single angle. We just don't have, it's not just MLS, we have people that are working on policy. We have a Fed Tech committee too as well. So I think with this particular topic, AI, there's a lot of scary things that can happen with it too as well. So, and that's one of the things we do. We're always looking at it from the risk mitigation standpoint. So, just kind of wanted to let everybody know that we're not turning a blind eye to it, and look for more things on that.
Thank you. I know I was speaking to a company just this past week, and somebody was working on computer vision and using photographs to create data. And one of the perspectives was, we have the stats today. So certification analytics has given us the ability to say, hey, this on average we have these many fields and this stuff is populated. Can we use computer vision then to take 120 fields on average and bring that up to 150 through the photos? Can we bring that up to, can we increase 15, 20% of the richness of the data set strictly through photography? And I'm like, well, it's an interesting conversation. It sounds like really amazing tech, but I think there are questions around, how do you feel about that? It's not always, as Greg said, it's not always 100% accurate. Kind of scary. Things could have been left off as a marketing piece intentionally. I don't know. So these are all kind of interesting things that I'm hearing about and seeing. So I thought it worthy of any additional conversation or thought. Please feel free.
Not actually a pain point, but one thing that I would encourage any association or MLS to do is if you use ChatGPT, you can actually upload all of your documentation in there, like your rules, and it'll almost turn anybody into like an industry expert on a local market. So once you learn how to prompt it correctly, you can take all of your rules, ask very, very specific or nuanced questions about your association or your MLS or your use case policy. So we're a member of 100 MLSs, and compliance, display compliance is very difficult when you go across 100 MLSs. But we can use that to say, if we're trying to do something or use data in a different way, how do we stay compliant but looking at a large amount of associations all at the same time? And to take your documentation to actually train your version of ChatGPT, it takes like a day, but it saves you a year. And it's really amazing. I think that's one thing you guys should all do.
I'll throw the counterpoint to Mr. Josh over here, which is if you actually read the terms of service. Has anybody actually read the terms of service of ChatGPT? Okay, see. He said he fell asleep twice. Anything you upload, any data set you upload to it, they can use for any other purpose that they want. So we actually looked into uploading and figuring out if we could train it against MLS data. And before we did that, we actually read the terms of service and realized that we would be passing copyright over to them to start using the data, and said, ooh, no. So I will throw one other thing too, which is about the watermark and about the other issue, is the thing that you have to remember, and that I think we should all keep our eyes on, is it's still up to the practitioner to put the right data in. And they may be ignorant of the fact that it's putting in wrong data, but it's still up to the practitioner to make sure their data entry is quality. And I think that's where all of the MLSs and associations and everybody like that in the room, you probably have a little bit of responsibility to make sure to send a message out to your members to say, hey, if you use ChatGPT, that doesn't absolve you of putting good data into the MLS. So.
Right, and towards that point specifically, I think people need to start thinking about how do we bring it on-prem to be able to put our version like llama or any other kind of South American animal model that they're using, like there's about 7 or 8 of them out there right now, because you do lose control of everything when you use OpenAI stuff. They basically are going to suck all your data in and add it to their work. And I think it needs to go the other way, is their stuff has to go into your side, and then you feed it your data, and then you get results from that. And I'd also like to, could we as a planet stop calling it artificial intelligence? We don't even know how our intelligence works. Like, it's machine learning. It's the coolest parrot ever. You fill it with stuff, and then cool stuff comes out the other end. But if you fill it with garbage, you get garbage at the other end. And one thing I would encourage people to be very careful with giving control of the prompt to people who don't know what they're doing, because you will get very weird results that are challenging for any organization to work with, including those outside of real estate, where if you don't know what you're doing and you put a prompt in, you're going to get into all kinds of trouble eventually. So you really need to pay attention to that. And like Eric was saying, it's still your responsibility to make sure that that information is correct. You're not breaking copyright, which we already do with photos almost all the time, where somebody's like, that's a great photo of the outside of the condo that I'm selling this other unit in. Probably not yours to use. It was from another listing, might have been taken by a professional photographer. So we need to be more careful and diligent in reminding everybody that, hey, you're the person putting it in, you're still responsible for this, so just be careful.
Okay. I know this is RESO, and so it's really about standards, and I don't think we're quite at a point yet where there's enough knowledge, rules, and everything else to apply standards, but I would have to guess. You know, we're keeping a really close eye on it. I know Sam and team certainly have a lot of thoughts on it, but interesting conversation, just the same. I think we're talking about media and licenses. We've had discussions as far as, you know, adding imaging, licensing rights to media, passing it down, having it in standards, making sure people know when to do things, when to take them down. I've certainly struggled with this.
I have a different pain point if we want to change direction slightly. So as someone who's been around for a little while and done a lot of integration work, quite often we're getting people make requests to, you know, I want my system to have a single sign-on. Brokers love this, right? Like I'm part of my proposition to an agent is I bring this good technology that's going to make your workflow better, it's going to make all this stuff better, and then they're trying to integrate small companies into some sort of dashboard or something like that, and it's not really that easy. They may be standards, but things like SAML and OAuth 2 are very complex and quite often very difficult to complete. One thing we talked about this morning in one of the breakout sessions is maybe it's time for us to start thinking about how we bring in the big federation players that we're already using in our organizations, particularly broker organizations. You probably are using either Office 365 or G Suite for providing text processing and spreadsheets and all that kind of stuff. Well, they have a team of thousands of people working on their security and identity. Why aren't we talking about how we can federate with, like, Google, Microsoft, Apple? They're like vampires, right? They want you in their ecosystem, so they're going to do everything they can to make it good and secure. We're a small industry, we're trying to implement all these standards. Well, maybe that's one where we just say, hey, it's easy to federate with these guys. Let's use them to provide the identity. We still have our internal, not the identity, but the authorization portion of it. You are allowed to use these things, but for the identity, why not use some of these guys instead of, you know, building our own solution? Again, that's not easy to integrate with other small companies for these types of products where the brokers are trying to bring in agents. Just throwing that out there.
Are there pain points with single sign-on that people want to talk about?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about it more if you want. I can keep going on this one. There's a lot of pain there. I've done probably 10 or so integrations, and 0 of them have gone well. They stretch out for months on end because you never get the right guy. Sometimes they misconfigure their system, sometimes you misconfigure their system, your system to talk to them, and by the time you get it done, it's like 6 weeks, 2 months, which should be an afternoon's work. And it's all human-driven, not technology-driven, but it's complex technology, and if you get one thing wrong, it's difficult to shake it out. And I think Paul Hethman was saying earlier, you know, show me what's actually on the wire, and then we can debug this, right? But none of them have gone well, and everybody wants it. So to me, that's an actual pain point that we might be able to help a little bit by saying, maybe what you need to do is just use Microsoft Authenticator, right? Their whole authentication system, or Google's authentication system. So Yeah, so I do have experience with the pain of that one.
Others? Anybody else want to contribute to this? Other thoughts? No? All right, I will say the pain point session is where we really talk about what's next on the roadmap. And what are the items that are slowing you guys down, and what are the items that are hurting you in your day-to-day business from both the consumer or a producer side. And so I will ask, I have a few topics I can read off a sheet. But you all stayed here to talk about challenges. I'd love to hear what some of your challenges and pain points are, and how can RESO help you get a little bit better day to day?
Hi, good morning. Is this on? So pain points, thinking about a lot of things that are happening outside of the real estate industry that are having an impact on our real estate space. I sit on the National Association of Realtors Sustainability Advisory Group as well, and I've been very involved in green data initiatives with CMLS and RESO from the data perspective and implementations. And last year, NAR adopted sustainability as one of its 4 strategic priorities, and a component of that is data. Just want to add a friendly reminder that also the federal government last year passed a lot of tax rebates and incentives to incentivize people to make changes to our buildings and housing stock, which we have fields for in the data dictionary that are not yet being used in many systems throughout the real estate transaction process. So I guess a pain point, or really an encouragement, would be to evaluate those RESO green verification and power production resources and add those to your systems, because you're going to see a lot more of this information. Well, it's already available in your marketplaces, but increased demand for it. Consumers are increasingly looking for it. We talked yesterday some about smart technology that doesn't necessarily translate to energy efficiency or sustainability. But one of the components of NAR's strategic initiative around sustainability is data. So we're also working on sustainability assessment tools for associations to utilize. So having that data component is going to be an easy way to help support sustainability in your local marketplaces as well. So the green verification and power production resources in the data dictionary, and CMLS also has a green data best practices guide if there's any questions about implementation and placement.
So I guess my bit would be, do we have the right fields? There is a challenge. Do we have the right fields there to start with in the data dictionary? And then the follow-up then is the challenge, they're not being populated when perhaps they could be. And
yes, there are a few fields that are being added to the data dictionary. The data dictionary work group recently passed a resource or a collection of fields for battery storage, power storage information to support, if somebody has a solar system and they have a battery storage system, how do we capture that information? So that was recently passed, data dictionary work group. There's a few other components that are included in the IRA tax incentives and rebates that we don't have data fields for in the RESO data dictionary that have been requested to be added as well, so that we can make sure that we're sort of keeping up with influencing factors that are happening outside of our immediate real estate space that are having an impact on our properties that we need to account for.
Rick, I don't know about you, but for us, it's a very low adopted field that we see. We see a number of MLSs that have added it and advertised it in the metadata, but it's almost always completely blank. Is any MLS in here really good? They believe that their data set is very good for green features. Anybody want to be proud of the work they did? No? Oh, Greg. See, yeah, Greg. Greg's been talking about it for years. I think the very first RESO I ever went, you did a presentation. Yeah, our MLS I think has good data on it, but have you guys seen much with green fields?
I think it's improving. I think we're seeing adoption and growth with it. I still think there's probably a lot of stuff that isn't getting populated that maybe could be.
Yep. I live in Florida, and generator is a big thing, and I almost never see that field, even in Florida, too. So I don't think there's a field for that.
Interesting.
Oh, I talked to Meg yesterday, and I think the reason why Greg is so good is because it was a mandate of the city of Portland, right?
So if she's right, and that's going to start spreading around the country, which I think it will eventually, it is something we'd like to see more people implement.
And we have code, guys. I mean, because we get to work with Beg's company that really does pull data in. And I mean, we're happy to share that with anyone who's looking at implementing to take the pain out of that lift. So I'm sure you can find me on a RESO roster or something, or get a hold of Meg. I mean, she works with us. We talk to her probably at least quarterly, but we're happy to share those calls that we send in to pull data right out of their system.
Okay. We had a whole bunch of topics covered over the past few days. Ad edit, webhooks, new things. Does anybody have questions about some of the things they heard today? What they're looking for further clarity, looking to get some additional information, have strong opinions? What is it that you guys need? I was speaking to somebody about the need for webhooks in a use case just a little bit ago. Are there things that we can answer that way?
You guys are a quiet bunch today.
I know. I mean,
you know, I think one of our big pain points are, you know, think about you change a price on a listing, right? And I mean, you know, the poor vendor out there is pulling every field in, you know, and normally every picture. And all we did was get a price change. So, I mean, we've got to find a way to lighten those loads. I mean, if you think you're running in the cloud, I mean, you've got like nickels and dimes flying down the pipe, you know, as they're pulling 100 pictures back, nothing changed there. I mean, you can't blame the vendors personally, and I mean, I'm the provider side, but I mean, you really can't blame them because there's not a real clean way to communicate. You know, we sold the, you know, the listing sold. Well, there's 8 or 10 fields maybe that need to go out, you know. Who sold it, what was the price, days on market, any of that stuff. But again, they're sweeping everything so they can, you know, keep everything in perfect sync. But I mean, it would be great to find a really lightweight way to send that new price or the new extended date or whatever it happens to be that got changed instead of, you know, having them come to sweep it all because it's the best way to do it today.
yeah, I know when it comes to media, come on up. When it comes to media, I know for us, we have to check several time fields and we have to be overly cautious because you can never be missing a photo. You know, for my many years at Realtor, my years, you know, at Constellation, it is always a top complaint is if you are missing a photo, you will find out, somebody will tell you right away. And so there are multiple timestamps. You check the listing, you make sure it's there. If that timestamp's changed, you got to go get photos. You check photo modification timestamps. And some of it just becomes a trust issue where you have to re-pull photos over and over again just to be 1,000% sure because you can't ever be wrong, ever. It's always going to be a concern.
So shifting it up a little bit, I think RESO and Greg Sachs specifically have done a really good job with like the RET's extinction countdown and trying to track the number of users who are moving over to the web API. In my experience, I'm seeing a lot of cases that might not be reported correctly, people saying that they're at 100% when I know they're giving out lots of RETS feeds. So I was wondering if there's anything we can do to either make that an automated process or maybe get some feedback on how that's necessarily collected.
So the question was, just kind of to reword, that's why I get it. You're seeing in the reports that they are RESO, they're Web API compliant, but yet they're still giving out RETS credentials.
Well, not only that they're Web API compliant, but that they say that 100% of their feeds are on Web API, and they are not.
I can second that.
Okay. Everyone here's like, we don't do that.
Thank you, Al. No, it's a good point. So just for perspective on this here, everyone, basically all MLSs have a web API service. They have varying percentages of their customers using that. So that's what the RETS extinction countdown is how many of their customers have they converted to web API. Those are self-reported numbers. So what we have is self-reported numbers from MLSs. Now, this is public information, so the expectation is that companies report things that they expect to be published and have feedback on that. If there are better mechanisms for us to report that. If you have suggestions for that, we'd be happy to. It's been a carrot approach to this point. Great publicity for the organizations who are doing that work. But again, it's self-reported. So do you have suggestions for better ways we could report that information?
You could survey the consumers.
Are you going to get the right answer?
Give us some details. We can get in the weeds today.
Well, okay, so you could survey the consumers and say, hey, for all the consumers that are out there, send out the blast and say, hey, for each MLS, how are you receiving data? What credential are you using today? And we could certainly fill that out, and you would get what it is we're using today, whether it's RETS, whether it's Web API. There's still one FTP out there that I know of for me.
The other thing is I think in the long days of RETS, there was a lot of credentials given out that maybe the MLS doesn't even know what's out there. They're on legacy systems that are still humming away because they've been working for 20 years. But I think the problem is they don't know until you shut off every single place RETS can be, you'll not know that you're actually 100% on Web API.
That's what we need to hear from you, because we've been at some conferences where people talked about data consumers still being on FTP, and sometimes it gets laughed at by some of the people in the room, but this is real. There's not a reporting mechanism for that. We're not looking to punish anyone at RESO, but if we can get better information, let us know how we can do that.
Right. And it could be the interpretation. Come on up to the mic. It could just be the interpretation is we don't give out those credentials anymore. All new stuff is Web API. That could be a logical explanation for the self-reporting, maybe.
I just wanted to make the point that we cannot get rid of RETS until Web API figures out add edit. So until that gets sussed out, we're stuck with RETS.
So that adds a lot of urgency to add edit then. That's an interesting bit. Okay.
We had a lot of conversation about it internally, and we just kind of came to the realization that if CoreLogic Matrix gives CoreLogic Data Checker or CoreLogic Clarity a RETS feed, and it's all inside their own company, we don't care. They're not a customer, to what Sam said, 100% customer-facing Web API. And we let it slide. We just pretended it didn't exist.
Well, I think that in another way that's fair because you don't even have control over that. It's what the MLS has control over. I don't think anybody would argue against that. I think the other argument is there are still credentials that are working with vendors that have been working for 15 years, and I feel like there's endpoints in lots of places. This is what I talked to Josh Darnell about this a lot, of all these endpoints to get the RETS data or the MLS data, and MLSs don't even know what their endpoint is that they have on because it was turned on 15 years ago and nobody's ever touched it, but the same person's using the credentials from 15 years ago.
We experienced a recent issue where we wanted to put somebody on API, but unfortunately the agent photos and bios aren't available in RETS. So, in the API, so we have to give them RETS until we can get there.
So
we've dealt with that.
I'm sorry, did you say that again?
The agent photos and the bios weren't available in the API, so we had no choice but to put them on RETS.
It should be available. You can expand out the photos in Web API. We do that with multiple boards for our Solid Earth customers on Web APIs, but that doesn't mean the vendor has it available.
With the bios and stuff, you can always extend the data dictionary too to add other things. So I think there it's maybe a conversation with whoever your vendor is, whoever that provider is, and say, why are these things not available?
Is Al your vendor?
Well, yeah, and unfortunately, I'm not going to correct him on that one because he's right. We don't currently have agent photos in Web API for Trestle, but we also in Trestle don't have them for RETS either. So it's across the board. I think I've made this point before. I personally don't have much stake in whether it's RETS or Web API. I'm more care to make sure that the stats are accurate. So I would say my suggestion for kind of helping this would be a way for consumers to be able to just push a button and report. Say this vendor says they're 100%, we've been told we have to use RETS feeds, hit a button, Josh or whoever gets to go in and look at it and just kind of confirm that there's some misrepresentation there.
I do have the obvious question, which is why are agent photos not part of the web API? Why are there still data sets that are not part of the API? Is there a limitation of dictionary, web API, or anything else? Or is it just a matter of getting to the work?
Yep, prioritization only. No technical limitation there. It's totally supported in both sides.
Yeah, it's available. We get it through Web API, no problem. It's just not everybody has it. I mean, I don't know if Joseph from MLS Grid is in here, but he gave us the full list of who had it and who didn't. And it was only about a third of their entire MLS Grid members passed the photo and office logo through to him to then pass it on.
Yeah, because I've had to deal with this recently as well. And so what it means for us is we have to do multiple credentials, right? We have a web API credential to pull the listings, the listing photos, and then you've got to have a whole nother way to do 2 credentials for the same data source to go pull agent photos. We had a little bit of this with Nestfully where we had to do this. That's an important piece there. So it does create a lot of pain for us. That is something I'd love to see get corrected because it does create challenges.
And by the way, if anybody doesn't want to come to a mic, I will come to you. So just raise your hand.
He was really excited about being able to run a mic to everybody today. Everyone's doing an awesome job going to the mic, but
I got to get my steps in for that.
Go ahead.
Oh, hey, just the last bit of conversation made me think about back to yesterday when we were just talking about the convenience for the consumer and the agent on the ground. Like if all of a sudden you have some kind of front-end app that you're using with your clients and update your picture. You just met with your photographer and you just open your app and you, just like on Facebook or Instagram, you tap the little plus and you add your photo. Why can't that go up to the MLS and all the other vendors who need it and everybody else? Why is it rocket science? Could we, and with Ad Edit, for example, whenever we even talk about Ad Edit, like I anyway think about the MLS, but just over this conference, there's been such kind of brain emoji excitement about we have the ability to use the Ad Edit standard and pass it back to the MLS for all this rich information that they might be interested in. So I'd love to even hear from an MLS about if somehow the experience for your members was really easy and the information could come back to you and it could be quality and your vendor could aggregate it, would that be of interest?
I think the concern for most MLSs, and feel free to somebody to raise their hand and say otherwise, but I think the concern around Ad Edit for all time, even Rhett's Ad Edit, has been you said the word quality, Catherine, getting the quality of the data following business rules back into the system. That being said, I think the biggest hindrance that we have right now, and the sentiment has changed over the past 5 years to allow more Ad Edit. George has been doing it for a long time. There's a couple other MLSs, Iris and RE Colorado have allowed it for a while. But the problem is in Web API, we don't have, the standard for Ad Edit has not been approved yet.
Yeah, just to build on that.
Okay, sorry. Just to answer that from TRIBUS there. That's what's really exciting about the RESO common payload or format in JSON, because then it's not reliant necessarily. It kind of takes Web API and adds an extension where we could get back to that global common language that's even where, we expand as a standards organization internationally because we're not, I guess, bound by Web API so much because we have this JSON payload that we all agree has a RESO standard, and we could look at that. So does that change anything?
The problem is, at least as I see it right now, the problem is the business rules around it. You're absolutely right in everything you're saying, except one MLS may say certain business rules for beds and bathroom, right? Everybody knows bathroom math is the hardest math in the world. So one MLS may say,
market.
It could be. I still say bathroom math. But what's a 1/4 bath? In one MLS, a 1/4 bath means X. In another MLS, there's no such thing as a quarter bath. There's 3/4 baths. And then who knows what the difference between a 3/4 bath and a 1/4 bath is. So the problem is figuring all that out. There are companies in this space that are starting to work on making those business rules around it that'll help out, which I'm really excited by. But I think every MLS exec in the room right now, and again, please somebody feel free to stand up and say otherwise, but I think every MLS and exec has a lot of trepidation around allowing ad edit because it will bust their data validation.
Yeah, to build on that, what we've run into with ad edit, twofold problem. Not necessarily mapping the data, quarter bathrooms is one thing, but that's usually pretty easy to compensate for. If you're looking to do one form that goes into multiple places, that increases the complexity. But if you do multiple forms, a lot of the companies that go into this space, they'll do a side-by-side form, or something like that. And there are ways around it. But the two biggest problems we run into is one, getting clear business rules. And it looks like we're trying to address that, and that's great. I love that. And then two is the number of MLS systems that can accept ad edit. And even the ones that do generally comes with increased cost. So between larger MLSs like Georgia MLS and First MLS, not a big deal. When we start talking to some of the small to mid-size MLSs in our state, it becomes a hindrance. We can't insert listings because they're on a system or a platform. They can't accept it.
And I would love to hear from maybe the MLSs here if there's reasons why you don't accept ad edit today. Are there technical reasons? Is it just a business reason? Is it what Eric mentioned? I know there is a lot of ask.
You know, I'll say that, I've been hoping for, ad edit since probably 2005, just as, from a workflow, from the agents. I go visit my client, they fill out the listing input form, I push it up to the MLS and magically everything works. That's been the kind of the goal forever. But yeah, there's a lot of, technical limitations, from vendor to vendor. Sometimes the data validation takes, is on the front end. Sometimes data validation is on submit. There's a lot of different places where everything that we do to make sure that this data is high quality, and just technically unfortunately, we haven't gotten there yet. And, it's not for the lack of, wanting to do it. But there's just a lot of work, required from a lot of different people to be able to standardize it and make it consumable, for everybody to use. So, from an MLS admin standpoint, it's never been that we didn't want to do it. It's just a heck of a lot more complicated than than it may seem, just on the outside. And with any of our, with any of my partners, we're happy to to work with them to help try to figure this out, because it is a it is a good goal, but it's a lofty goal.
I'll echo the same sentiment. I mean, we're waiting for API update to get done. We have a backlog of vendors begging us for that. We would love to be the first MLS in the country to offer no front end, where you just push listings in. We've had a few brokerages in our market try it, because the only way to do it is RETS. They fail. Even Welcome At, we're getting ready to launch that, but we had to go take 3 steps back. They said, hey, can you turn on our API update key? And we said, no. So they had to take a step back in development and learn how to use RETS update. So again, that's where we are as an industry right now. And that is the holdup. I mean, we are excited about it, but we're not there yet. And then on the vendor side too, increasing costs from the MLS providers back to either the MLS systems or the vendors who are trying to consume update. We've had a 3-fold increase in the implementation costs.
So if you could say who you are and what company you're with when you come up to the microphone. We just had a couple people who had to leave early, and they really liked what they heard from a couple speakers and wanted to connect with you, so that would be great.
Sure. Matt Nagy, Triangle MLS.
Thanks,
Raleigh.
And then I want to make it really exciting. RESO strives to increase competition in the marketplace. And will not be, we didn't read it this morning. You remember our antitrust policy. We should just go through that when we start these meetings. So thank you. You're all abiding by it. It's great. So continue, please.
Thanks, Sam. That didn't just kill the energy. It's fine. It's just fine. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Brian Berger's Dumbest. I was in the UPI Universal Property Indicator work group I think it was yesterday, and it sounded like there was a ton of consumers very interested in that, and there was a ton of vendors that could provide it, but the number of, for whatever reason, that number is still really low of people getting UPIs. So that's a pain point, where is that bottleneck? Why aren't we getting the UPIs? That sort of thing.
I second that I don't see it in data, and I would map it if I did. Anybody want to speak?
Is anybody from Stellar in the room? No. I will say Stellar has been pretty good about starting to get that field in there, which I've been really happy about. And I know there's a couple other MLSs that are working on it, but I still don't know why 4 years or whatever it is after UPI we don't have more of it. And Trestle's we've been starting to get it more from you guys too.
So we've started populating ours, and we did a bunch of work leading up to the last RESO event and had it ready to hit the button and populate it across every record in our system. And then in the work group, they found some flaws in the current model. So we've been kind of holding out, waiting to see if those flaws are going to be rectified before we go through and push, that 200 million back out again everywhere.
You want to do that twice?
I mean, I don't mind doing it twice if everyone wants to eat that twice, but so yeah, I think then and no knock on the work group at all. I think they're doing great work there, but I think that's where sometimes it takes a little while to get iterating on this, but just kind of emphasizes how it's important to get more people involved and make the decisions as fast as we can.
Okay. Yeah, I would love to see it. I think it's a very useful resource. I think it's a very useful piece of data. Could help so much with duplication, and there is a lot of duplication. So I think it would really help on the analytics side. So there's tremendous value to it for sure.
Eric, would you like to be able to consume UPI version 1.0 and maybe version 2.0 in the future to make sure you had APNs coming to your system?
Absolutely. I will take it even if it's wrong. So my answer might not be the popular answer, but it's going to be right the vast majority of the time, and we could at least start solving problems that brokers have. And it's a real problem for the MLSs in here that don't talk to your brokers necessarily all the time about this, especially if you have overlapping MLSs. And if you want to look at the certification.reso.com map, you can see all the overlays of where MLSs cross over, even when you don't think they cross over. It's massive, Rick just said. And so anytime you have that, even if it's right 99% of the time, 90% of the time, it still solves duplicate property records. And we have, as a company, made the decision we were not going to try to dedupe unless we could be certain that the dedupe was correct. Because otherwise you get somebody saying, just like photos, my listing's not showing up on the site. That's even worse than a missing photo, right? And so even if it's right most of the time, I'll take that any day of the week to solve problems like in San Francisco, where every listing can show up 4 times, right?
So as Jeff Bosch from Iris, as the non-technologist in the room, I think the problem with UPI right now is the U. It's to the, hey, my UPI versus my UPI versus my UPI. I mean, I don't, unless you guys have it and we're not aware of it, we're functionally in a market with an overlap with 2 different systems and 2 different providers, and we don't have a U. We don't have one that we feel we can share back and forth. And I think it would be better if that was done at a level higher than the MLS.
So yeah, the way the UPI has been created, it's just a collection of data parts that creates the identity. So even if multiple organizations are looking at the same data, as long as they have the necessary data elements, 2 different organizations could come up with the same API at 2 different places, the way that the algorithm was organized. So it is a pretty interesting bit. Maybe we could connect a little right after this. I could actually fill you in a little bit.
And you can do a confidence score on it as well. So you can say, I'm this percentage certain that it is universal and that it should be correct. And when I'm not above a certain confidence score, then I don't have it. But a lot of MLSs have said, oh, well, the vendors can just calculate it. But here's the problem. We, until the past year or so, there's two values that go to make up UPI, for those that don't know. It's the APN number and the FIPS code. And the FIPS code comes from the county and the location that it's in. Well, one, we don't get APN a lot of times from MLSs. And two, I can think of maybe 2 out of 200 MLSs that we get county for. And if we don't get county, we have to do the geo lookup to find the county to find the FIPS code, which makes it a whole lot of steps instead of just getting the county. That way we could create it. But it would be easier at the MLS level or at the vendor level, like, Black Knight or whatever that has this data ready available. I mean, obviously CoreLogic has this data readily available. But I think there are ways to solve it, Jeff.
Hi. Yeah, I came up earlier. I'm Catherine McIntosh with Listed, and our company's in Toronto, Canada. So, yeah, I like that distinction that was made yesterday in the UPI group, which is it's not useful when it's unique property identifier, it's universal property identifier, to Jeff's point. So when it's universal, it's great, because then when you're in an area with overlapping borders, you can take a property and know that all these listings apply to this exact property. But if as a vendor, we're not able to triangulate with the APN here in Canada, it's called ARN, we also generally don't get that. And even in some MLSs, when it is populated, it's a string. So if someone puts it in wrong, then you're actually calculating an incorrect value because it's not verified from the tax records. So that's just a really good example with the UPI, and we've wanted to use it and implement it for a very long time to basically solve the two main pain points of overlapping border MLSs and just being able to aggregate and have one listing that they all map to. But the other really important use case is agents feeling like they're missing information because they go to a property and they're going to look at the property history. And the property history isn't aggregated because there isn't a universal property identifier. So what's happening is if it's 123 Main ST and then it's 123 Main Street, or like whatever happens that is not allowing the sales history to be aggregated at a property level, so those listings are all on that property. So what we're going to do, actually I spoke yesterday with Paul Heathman, because AMP is in one of the MLSs that we work with. And so we talked about just getting the MLS, getting the vendor, which is AMP, and us, and just putting some stones together and saying, this is the roadmap to get the UPI, and wherever I have a blank circle where I don't know what to do, I'm going to put a question mark, and we're just going to hammer it out. And I think even from our interoperability work group, that's what we want people to do. When there's a pain point and we don't know the answer or you don't know the answer, like Zenless coming up and talking about it as well. As a vendor, we so much want to work with the MLSs to make this possible and the vendors for the MLSs. So even if you don't know the answer, we're just going to put circles where we don't know and then fill it in and talk about it again at the next RESO or on the work groups. Oh, okay, before I go, can I say one more thing? I'd love to know from the MLS's perspective. In speaking with a number of MLSs here at this conference, some of the data they have, particularly showing data, happens outside their MLS. Like they're not actually taking that information into the MLS. And I won't speak for other people, but from our perspective, I think the MLS is our greatest technology. Not even like as a concept, right? Entrenched in compensation and cooperation. So it really helps as a vendor to be a really strong spoke in the wheel of the MLS and make it stronger if the MLS is a hub. And I think a lot of forward thinking in the showing hub as an extension of our interoperability work group, Chris Ran and a number of other MLSs worked on, Bright MLS. And the third one. But they did all this work to make this hub that really makes the MLS the core center because we depend on the MLS to be a source of truth. And then you're also the leader in the market so that anybody can come to you, and you make your own MLS sphere stronger the more vendors you interoperate with, because then you're deferring risk and increasing certainty about always giving your members the best product and having the greatest innovation with the least risk to yourself and your members. But I'd love thoughts on that from the MLS perspective.
Bill Boyer with Real Geeks in Sync. I want the UPI, please. I don't care if it's perfect.
And by the way, for those of you that don't know in the room, sometimes MLSs say, well, why can't you just use the APN? And it's very possible that APNs cross over from one county to the next. So that's actually why the UPI was started, was to try to solve that problem where you combine the FIPS code with the APN number.
Well, I got a great opportunity to talk to a friend of mine over at MLS Listings who basically schooled us at RMLS on how they created. And I mean, you saw in the presentation, they've done a great job of populating the UPI. And it really, you lead with tax data. You don't lead with your listing data. And I mean, I've had great success because basically what I've done is, you join the two together. So if you don't have a valid record in tax, you pretty much should know you don't have a valid APN. And then it's easy to kind of string it together. I mean, and you start light and easy, like with single family residences. So, those are, truly parcels, and they're not condos, they're not mobiles or anything else. And then you build on success and you look at your corner cases. And, we've got about 2 million records, I think 2.5 million records in our database. My first shot at it, we filled over 1 million UPIs. Now, talk about downstream effects of that. We've done this on staging surveys because we're a little nervous to, basically affect mod dates or affect listings at that kind of scale. So then, our next engineering feat is how do we slice and dice, right? We start with active listings or something like that, and then, walk through it at 10 or 15,000, a shot, maybe, twice a day or something, and, we'll get to that number in a couple of weeks, and we're done. But I mean, it was a really bright light bulb, and that was the simplicity of it made such great sense to me that it's easy to get success then. But lead with your public records data. Yeah. So I mean, here's Olga in the room, but I mean, she I got a 30-minute schooling from her and her engineering team, and off we went to the races.
And it really does solve a pain point for consumers, for brokers, for franchises, for application builders, and being able to identify a unique listing, a unique property, there is a lot of duplication out there, and it really helps, especially historically, and it really helps bring it all together, which allows truthful, complete, good information to reach consumers. And it is a big lift, I get it to a degree. Not everybody's access to public data to pull the FIPS, some of that, and so other companies are doing it. But it really is a useful piece of information. I mean, it gets used for a lot of applications. I don't think people understand the value it creates all the time.
The other thing too is I'm always shocked that MLSs don't have it inside of their system, that when you go to enter a listing or when you go to view a listing, you don't see parcel-centric information to say, hey, here's all the times this property has previously been sold. I know there's 1 or 2 MLSs that do that, but it's really rare, and I'm surprised you guys, the MLSs in the room, don't want to be able to create that aggregated information so that you can look back and see, here's the average property, here's what it's sold for over the period of time, and we can compare literally down to the parcel level of, here it sold 5 years ago, now sold this, and you can start doing the AI on the pictures to say, here's what was done to it that made it go up in value by that much.
Sam?
So we'd like to hear your feedback on a little bit of a different topic too that came up and was in our pain points suggestions. So RESO doesn't have any say in what kind of licenses you have with your partners, your data companies you work with, but licensing is a big topic right now. And are there ways that we can help consumers of that data understand what their rights are about those licenses as they get that data downstream and how they can use it? We have transport work group who has capabilities of transferring information about business uses in those data feeds, but NAR's got a sample license agreement for certain things, but media is a big topic right now. Are there areas we should be working on to be able to sort of chunk up data licenses into well understood concepts that you could deliver in a data feed to the consumers of that media so that they'd understand you have A, B, and C in this license and X, Y, and Z in that license? It may or may not be our wheelhouse, but we got a bunch of questions about it, so we'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I know as a consumer, I want to make sure I'm doing things the right way and I'm not showing photos I shouldn't show anymore, when to take things down. We want to make sure we're doing the right thing. So are there pain points and mistakes you see, consumers, portals, not honoring rules or things you would like done? Because this would be a great place to raise that. I say, and Eric will run to you. Ah.
Hello.
Hi.
This may be slightly related to what you're saying, but one of the things that I was thinking about as we were doing even the standard status review, when you're looking at defining the statuses, even working inside Data Dictionary, you can kind of relate the field to the license type that you might find it in inside the definition. So you're not necessarily defining the license, but you're helping define the content that the license is giving you access to and connecting the dots more specifically. So where I work right now, I'm with Lone Wolf. My engineers ask me about different statuses. I understand why they don't see that status, but I realized when I'm looking at it and and looking at the actual language and the definition, they don't see that. So that would be a way that I think you could connect it, keep it related to RESO, and stay out of the legal side of, I'm so nervous talking on a mic, the legal side of actually having to create a template license.
So are you asking that in the documentation of the dictionary to tie business rules such as withdrawn is not part of IDX?
Yes.
As part of that definition, so people working with data know that in advance? Or it's simpler matter. You can kind of find it, but it's buried. You've got to know what you're doing.
Right. So, and there's a lot of people that come to it that don't know how to get started even. They're just like, oh, I found this page and I don't see anything on this page that tells me that.
No, I could see that. Okay.
And there's coming issues with this that everybody should be paying attention to with floor plans. Floor plan can come through either as a document or it can come through as an image. And you may not own that file. Whoever created the floor plan might be just licensing that file to you, and then you're passing it downstream and making it public. So definitely something to be aware of.
All right.
Did anything ever happen with the case with the floor plan of the builder community? Has that case been settled yet? Yes? Somebody said yes, no? No? Okay.
On appeal, it got sent back down to the lower court.
This is why we have to pay attention to this stuff. Oh yeah, it said it got on appeal, it's sent back down to the lower court.
All right. We have gone well over the 60 minutes at this point. But I'm here. Like I say, my flight's been delayed. And I'm sure yours has too. So I'm open to continue going. Are there topics, thoughts, concerns? Anything anybody wants to bring to the table? All right.
Here we go.
Hi.
Hello, Jesse from Mishrick. This is a request that's coming off the back of the data dictionary session this morning regarding RESO providing videos or explanations of implementations that have to be made from MLSs as a tool that we can help utilize, explain to our boards and voting committees why these changes have to happen. Because as much as I understand them, I'm not as much of an expert as the people presenting them. And for me personally, I would have to go to 24 meetings across all of my associations and the subcommittees and everything, and that's just not always feasible. So if we can have it be procedure when there's an implementation that has to go to MLSs, that there's an accompanying video explaining the why, the benefit, how it's going to help improve things, that would make it a lot easier on my end to help the votes go through to help make the implementations faster.
Okay.
How well does that carry over, do you think, and I would love to know if you've taken the Working with Real Estate Data course.
I have not yet, because I just found out about it here, but I will be doing that and encouraging my board to do it as well, because it takes them like 3 years to make a decision on a field change, and I can't.
I think the takeaway here from that, which got the first round of applause, so congratulations for that. I think the takeaway is at times we do make standards for reasons, and we have use cases that we vet out, but perhaps we're not doing the best job of, once we approve something, getting the messaging back out, we've approved something, and here's the reasons why, here's why it's important, here's the pain it's eliminating, and giving you guys the information you need to carry it down and to have that feedback back with your team and your members. Okay.
Yeah, because I can explain it until I'm blue in the face, but having someone from a point of view of expertise and authority explain it will have more power with those voting boards.
Awesome. Okay. I've got that noted. Cool. All right, then with that, unless there's anything else, I am going to wrap this up. I want to thank everybody for staying here. Thank you guys so very much. We had a really good attendance today. I'm happy to talk with anybody. I'll hang around for a little bit later. If anybody has any questions, thoughts, please come see me. Otherwise, thank you very much, and that wraps up this session. Thank you, Sam, the entire RESO team for doing an awesome job as always. Appreciate it so much. Thank you, guys.